Your full name, date of birth, and place of birth, please.
Robert Allen Cook, July 11, 26, and I was born in New York, in Albany, New York.
Okay. What was your educational background prior to entering service?
I was a high school graduate, Bethlehem Central High School, class of 43.
Okay. Do you remember where you were when you heard about Pearl Harbor?
Yes, I don't remember the name of the theater, but it was a theater on Hudson Avenue in Albany. My brother and cousin and I had gone to a movie on that Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
Came out of at the end of the movie, came out of the theater, and there was a big to-do on the street about the Japanese having bombed Pearl Harbor. I had no idea, of course, where Pearl Harbor was.
What was your reaction to the group you were with? Did they talk it over? Or?
Yeah, I don't think any of us had any idea what it meant to us. My brother was 18. My cousin was probably 21. They were, I don't really know what they thought. Personally, I was still 13, 14, 15. I was 15 years old again.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Did you enlist or were you drafted?
I enlisted.
Why?
Well, when every kid that could wanted to be a pilot. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to be a pilot. And the big problem for many kids with their eyesight wasn't perfect. So I followed the Naval aviation program from the time they started battling until I graduated from high school. And when I left high school, my plan was to become a Navy pilot. I wasn't old enough. I wasn't 17 at the time, so I couldn't start. The program started on the 1st of July, and I couldn't join it because I wasn't quite 17. I did take an exam while I was still in high school for the Navy V-12 program, which was really deck officers and others, mm-hmm. although I wasn't supposed to, because I wasn't going to be 17. Mm-hmm. I did take it, and I passed it, and I had to write him a letter and say, well, I'm sorry, I cheated, I can't join you on the 1st of July, because I got notice, come on and we'll enlist you. Mm-hmm. And they sent back a notice that I couldn't do it. It happened that about the middle of June, I got an offer to go to work for the U.S. Geological Survey summer program as a laborer, rebuilding their stream gauging stations in the Adirondack. Excuse me. And I started, I did start then, and I liked the work. It was hard work, we worked hard, but I kind of put the Navy in the background. I guess I originally thought as soon as I turned 17, I'll go and enlist, but I didn't. I worked with the Geological Survey until probably October. And then I came home, I left them the job up near Messina, and came home and got the paperwork together and the application and the letters of recommendation from businessmen and so on, and sent it in October. And they sent right back to come to New York to the Office of Naval Officer Procurement to take the exams there and the physical. I went down. I had been to New York just one time with the World's Fair for a couple days. I showed up at the Office of Naval Officer Procurement on Cedar Street, and as I walked in the door, the petty officer said, "You're too tall." And I hadn't thought about it, but I knew that I was 6'4", which the last time I'd been measured, which was probably June. And I felt a little chagrined that I was too tall. Mm-hmm. And that would end my career in the Naval as a naval pilot. But he said, "Let's measure you." And he put me up on the scale, and I was able to, I had my long pants on, I just cracked my knees just a hair. And they measured me, and "No, you're 6'4", and he put on the form, so I didn't have to do it again when I didn't have any clothes on. And that's how I passed. I don't think I really was much more than 6'4" if I was. I passed. They called me. They They sent me home on inactive, they enlisted me, sent me home on inactive duty. I took a job with the Army Depot in Voorheesville. I worked all that winter in the Army Depot. And
What did you do on
I was a laborer out, a hookup on a crew. It was a crane, worked with a crane crew that we hooked up the equipment that was there to ship overseas, put it on either loaded or unloaded cars, railroad cars. And I remember that long toward the end of February, I thought that I'd be hearing something, early February, I'd be hearing something because I knew the next class started at 1st of March. And lo and behold, early enough, I'd walk home, a neighbor used to take me in his car and drop me off down the road a quarter of a mile. And I walked home, and lo and behold, one afternoon, I looked up toward the house, and in the kitchen window, there was this long envelope. And I knew that had to be my orders. And sure enough, when I got home, and my mother was all excited, and I opened it up, and it said that I was to report to Middlebury College on the 1st of March and start my training. And the program had been changed from the V5 program, which had a certain amount of cachet, to the V12A program, which didn't mean that much to me. And that's what I did. I got on a bus from Troy and Albany and rode to Middlebury College, reported for duty. I was there from March 1st to November 1st, or to October, middle of October. While I was,
This was what year?
this is in 44. See, the war was really pretty
yes.
long. In the middle of the summer, I got a notice, or they sent out a notice, that the flight program, which I was aiming for, was closed. They had too many, they probably had thousands of pilots in training in this pipeline. And I wasn't even started yet. I was still there. I probably should explain. The reason I went to Middlebury, they sent me to Middlebury, was they were not taking pilot trainees right out of high school. They sent them for get them 1 year of college. Then they went to pre-flight or whatever the next step was. So that's how that happened. And so they gave me the option. They closed the flight program because they had too many, and they said you can go to boot camp, you can go to you get in the V12 program, or you can go to ROTC. So I opted for the ROTC, and I got it, and they sent me to R.P.I. And 1st of March, I'm 40, geez, years go by. Would that be 45? 44.
The war ended in August of 45.
45. Well, I'm just trying to think. It's November. I'm sorry. These numbers
okay.
are swimming around in my head. I started at Middlebury in spring of 44, so it would have been November of 44 that I went to R.P.I. All right. Sorry.
Okay.
And I was there for 5 terms. That would be a year and 8 months. I was there until June of 46 when I got commissioned. They did open, interestingly, they opened the flight program in about May. They sent around word, if any of you guys want to go back into flight that had been in it, back, we'll take you back in, we're going to start that program again. Well, I was only about a month from the commission, and I didn't see much sense in starting over again. So I didn't. I stayed and I got a deck officer's commission. That picture that I brought you was the day of my commissioning. That was the big, big day. That was a big day in my year.
You hold that up and.
Yeah, this was at R.P.I. in June of 46. This bright young ensign. Thought at the time maybe destined for a naval career.
Okay.
I was assigned to the DM-24, which is a destroyer mine layer in Charleston, South Carolina. 3 other young ensigns from R.P.I. or on the same orders. We traveled together by train and reported to the Navy Yard, to the ship. While I was at R.P.I., I was fortunate enough to be named as a platoon leader. They had 3 companies of ROTC there. I was a platoon leader my next to last term, and then my final term, I was appointed as a company commander, which gave me a certain amount of satisfaction. Those were the highlights of R.P.I., I guess.
Could I ask 2 things?
Sure.
While you were at R.P.I., first of all, well, 3, you had the end of the war in Europe.
Right.
How did you hear about this? What was the reaction?
Well, everybody was pretty happy about that. In June of 45, before the Japanese surrender, they had a training program. We spent a week on a minesweeper in New York Harbor and the adjacent areas. The war with Germany had been over for a couple of months by that time, but they were still looking for mines, and we served on what they call a DMS, which was a pretty small wooden minesweeper. That was my only naval experience while the war was still being fought. About a week on a minesweeper in the Atlantic off of Long Island.
One other thing,
Yeah.
the death of President Roosevelt, what was your reaction to that?
I don't remember. I think everybody was pretty shook up because we didn't expect it. I don't think I didn't have any particular political inclinations at that time. My father was a Democrat, my mother, I suppose. I think my grandparents had been Republicans, but they were dead by that time. I don't remember much reaction among the Navy guys. I'm sure there were some that thought it was wonderful and some that didn't. That he was a polarizing person.
Yes.
No question about that. But I can't say that I remember anything specific.
How about the dropping the atomic bombs?
I thought that was a great idea. We didn't know anything about it, of course. We just knew that that was going to end the war. We didn't know I think when the first reports came, I think everybody was pretty sure, well, this is it. That's going to do it. We didn't have any idea what it did, how bad it was, or good it was. It was just this happened. And I do think that there was pretty much welcomed by the Navy people. That'd be my recollection.
Okay, so you were on the Fraser. I know I
Yeah,
interrupted you.
no, that's all right. Yeah, I went aboard and was assigned as the assistant engineering officer. And I did a year.
Was this a fairly new ship?
It was a World War II vessel.
Okay.
It had been built as a destroyer and then converted to a mine layer. They had taken the torpedo tubes off the upper deck, gun deck, and put railroad tracks on both sides of the main deck so they could run cars. If mines were maybe 3 feet in diameter, these big round things, and unload cars that rolled along this track. And when they went off, the car went with them and sort of became the anchor. And then the cable was calibrated so that the mine was at a certain depth above that car. We never had any live mines aboard. We had dummies, demonstration we practiced with to lay mines. Then other mine sweepers would come along and try to find them and cut them loose, and then they'd come to the surface, and then I guess they blew them up, I don't know. But we never had any live ammunition. We had depth charges were live, but that was, we never were after any submarines. I did a year of, it was nearly 4 or 5 months before we had enough of a crew to make the ship go anywhere. The problem was that after the war, they discharged everybody they could discharge, and we ended up with a crew, what was really a skeleton crew, enough to keep the ship functional, but not enough to run it anywhere. And it probably would have been 3 or 4 months before they began bringing in crew from other places and build up the crew enough so we could go somewhere. And the first thing we did, we went to Guantanamo, which was the shakedown port. And we had been in the Navy Yard and had new radars and new things put aboard. And we took it to Guantanamo and shook it down as training. You probably know about that. We did make one trip to Panama, or 2-week trip to Panama with reserve officers and crew who in those days were given a 1-week, once-a-year training if they wanted it. I think it was voluntary. I don't think we went anywhere else while we were in Guantanamo. We went to, I know we had one Liberty. We took the ship, went to Kingston, Jamaica. I think that was about the extent of it, of my foreign travel. And Panama was the most distant place. Up and down the East Coast, we were in Norfolk and Charleston, back and forth a few times. That was it. I was mustered out in May. Came home, and went immediately to R.P.I. and enrolled for the summer program. The Navy I hadn't been in R.P.I. long enough to get a degree. And the program, the Navy programs that they gave us, gunnery and navigation and naval organization, so it didn't count toward a degree. So I started in July of...
Now this was using the GI Bill?
Yeah. I started in July of, would have been 46, and went to June of 47 again, and I got a degree as a Bachelor of Mechanical Engineering.
During that period, did you ever make use of the 5220 Club?
Probably. I would guess so, because I didn't have any other income. Or was that part of the school? I can't remember how they, I had to have some, I don't know which way it went, whether that was part of it, if we were in college, whether you had a special deal, except the 5220. I can't tell you. Seems to me that was different. It was.
Yeah, I think it was.
Yeah.
Separate.
If it was, I don't think I was in the 5220 club, because I went right into, and then I got out, had a job and went right to work after I left R.P.I. Got married and went right to work. And
Now, on inactive duty for that 3 years, well, from the end of 47 to 50, did you have to go to monthly meetings or any?
I never did a thing. I was not required to, and I'm not a joiner, I guess. I never wanted, I didn't plan to pursue it. I had a commission, which I really wasn't able to resign. My memory is you couldn't resign it right away. So, but I didn't bother. And I don't know, I never had any inclination to do that. When I went to work for the Public Service Commission at the state, and I worked there 2 years. And the Korean War broke out. There was a call for volunteers to go back on active duty. I wasn't particularly happy with the Public Service Commission. I had one promotion, but I couldn't, I guess I didn't see much future there. And I volunteered to go. My wife thought it was all right, not a bad idea. And I immediately, within days, I had a set of orders to report to New York, to Brooklyn Navy Yard, to be physically examined. And I had a promotion to Lieutenant Junior grade as part of that, which was nice. And I did. I went to New York and Brooklyn Navy Yard. I had to buy some new uniforms because I'd worn out that were thrown out. And reported and got orders to go immediately, practically. I guess I had a few days, back to Charleston to report for the USS Henley, the DD-762, which had just been put in mothballs within a few months before. And there was the first one to be taken out of mothballs following the Korean War start. It was a practically brand new ship. It had never had any World War II service because it was built it finally was commissioned in, I think, 46, and had been put in mothballs not long after that. No, I guess so. Anyway, it wasn't never was in any battles. And put that back in commission. I was again assigned as the assistant engineering officer and damage control officer. And we put it through a month or more in the Navy Yard, went back to Guantanamo Bay, shook it down again. I shook down that ship. We're sent back to Norfolk, and ship went into Portsmouth Navy Yard for more overhauls, more new equipment, more radars, changes, all the things to update it. While it was there, I was sent to firefighting school and damage control school in Philadelphia. That was about a 5-week thing, I think, while the ship was in the Navy Yard. And after that, I finished that training. I went back to the ship. We again went down to Guantanamo, shook the thing down again. Made a couple of other. We had a 1-month assignment at Pensacola as the Navy, what they called a flight guard. We were supposed to pick up anybody that didn't make the carriers. It was a training center for pilots. By that time, they were training them in jets. It wasn't the old propellers, and it was much different flying. You could see the old ones, which kind of brought them in, and they stalled and dropped them on the deck. These things didn't stall; they just roared right in. And if they missed, they missed. Luckily, fortunately for them and for us, the month that I was there, nobody missed. There were a few young men who flew out and didn't land. They flew back. They couldn't get the nerve up to land, and if they did that a couple times, they were gone. I don't know what they did, but I could see that occasionally that would happen. I don't think it happened to too many, but there were a few. We got all that distance with the flight training, and pilots, qualified pilots, but that looked a little hairy getting on it. But these were jets. I was, in a way, I was glad I had never become a Navy pilot, because I'm not sure I would have handled that very well either. And that was it. About a month after that session in Pensacola, we were back in Norfolk, and then I finished my year, and a young man came aboard, another young lieutenant, junior grade, took my position and relieved me, and I left the program, left the ship. Within a month after I left it, they were on their way to Europe. They had a cruise in the Mediterranean, just sort of an ideal thing for the Navy that I missed out on, but I didn't care. I was out then. And about 4 or 5 years later, I resigned my commission because I didn't want to be called again. It would have been probably in 55. It would be 5 years, 5 or 6 years later. As soon as I had 8 years of commission time and 2 years of active duty, sea duty, I could resign. So whatever that added up to, 54, 55, something like that. And that ended my naval career.
Okay. Do you remember any little stories or anything you want to tell that were kind of incidents that you remember that stand out in your mind more than others? Stories your wife told you have to tell?
No. She thought that little story about the envelope in the window was interesting, and I had forgotten all about it, and I happened to mention it to her. I can just remember how excited I was. I mean, I was a 17-year-old, and I just couldn't wait to
Now
go.
your parents must have signed for you.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure they did. But, I mean, I think most boys at that age, when the war was going on, couldn't wait to get I don't think I felt bad that I had lost 6 months because I was doing a job, and I guess it had some importance, maybe. But I remember that I when's it gonna come? When can I get going? And then I was surprised that they said Middlebury College. I thought I'd be going off to flight training or someplace. And it wasn't until I got to Middlebury that I found out why they were doing that they just weren't taking raw high school graduates and putting them in the program. I think, again, they had the pipeline full, thousands, certainly hundreds of pilots in training in a period of about a year and a half or 2 years. Well, I was just fortunate or unfortunate that I was a little younger than I could have been. If I'd have been 11 days older, I probably would have gone in 1st of July. I would have been qualified to go. And I would have been 8 months sooner in the training, and I probably would have become a pilot trainee. Whether I could have passed it or not, I'll never know. It was just that 11 days made a difference. And I was satisfied. I felt good about getting a commission, and I felt good about serving. We weren't required to serve that first year. The war was all over. If you wanted to, you could just get out in June or go on inactive duty. I do think if you wanted a commission, they expect you to do a year. But otherwise, you just got out. You just got out as a seaman or whatever. In the ROTC, you were a cadet, but you really were just an apprentice seaman. I mean, there wasn't anything special about it. That was the alternative. But I looked forward to that year, and was pleased to get a commission and pleased to do that service. Obviously I wasn't married and didn't have any strong attachments to anybody. I had a girlfriend, but that was it.
Did you join, I'm sorry.
No, that's all right.
Did you join any veterans organizations after you left?
No, I never did. Again, I've just never been a joiner. I don't know. I suppose if somebody had ever come to me and said, why don't you, I might have weakened, but nobody did. By the time I got out, the war was all over for 2 years, and nobody was thinking about veterans then. I mean, if you were a veteran, you've been already in.
How about, did you stay in contact with anyone that was in service with you?
Yes and no. There was one. It was a long period of time I didn't. I was trying to think of any exceptions to that. But in 1994, way up in 94, it happened because I was a company commander in the ROTC. I had a roster of all of the Navy guys, the V-12 and the ROTC, who were there as of the last, I might say, the wartime term, which was the spring term of 46. And as I say, in June of 46, they mustered, everybody got out or was commissioned. Because I had that roster, I was able to identify who was there. R.P.I. didn't have any records. And for some reason, I thought to talk to the Alumni Association and ask them whether they thought it would be sensible, good for R.P.I. if we tried to arrange a 50-year reunion of all the Navy guys who were ever at R.P.I. And the president said, yeah. So I sat down with the yearbooks from 43, somewhere, if they were Naval students and graduated, the pictures were in uniform in the yearbook. I could go through and get all of the people that I didn't know, that I knew, the last group of, a couple hundred probably. I was able to get a fairly good listing of all the guys who had gone through, at least who graduated. If they got busted out and went to boot camp, they weren't in there. And I don't know, must have been at least a couple hundred. And so we set up a reunion for the June of '95, which was 50 years from 45, which we just picked that out of the air. And we included the guys in 45, 46, and anybody else we could, if we could identify anybody. I don't think we tried after that, because this was the wartime, quote, ROTC. And we went through, I chaired the committee, and we worked hard and sent out notices to everybody we could find, every address, because there were a lot of them missing. Many of them didn't go back to R.P.I. to get finished, or whatever, they've just gone. We tried, we got a lot of them, and we ended up, I think, with 80. The number 80 comes to mind, whether that was the alumni or whether that was the families, husbands and wives, I'm not sure. But anyway, it was fairly successful. I got a lot of guys that I had never seen before. My roommate who took that picture showed up. In fact, that's where I got the picture. He had it all those years.
Really?
And I never had seen it before. Didn't know I had any pictures. And he handed me that one and another one like it. And he was my roommate my last term there. And the other roommate, he showed up from Revere, Mass. I hadn't seen him in 50 years. Plus several other guys. When we went through R.P.I. or through ROTC, we were in a group that kept sort of together, maybe 20 or whatever class size. And maybe 6 or 8 of those fellows showed up. Those are the fellows we knew best. And the others I knew. Fellows who'd been ahead of my class, some of them I knew. It was a very interesting. The only complaint I had about it was that I was so busy that I didn't have a chance to socialize. I just, was busy greeting and how are you, and the next thing I know, it was all over. And we had one breakfast at the hotel. This little group of ours together with their wives, and I had a camera, just an old film camera, and I didn't load the film right, and it didn't work, so I never got a picture. I should have known better. I mean, I just was so busy that I blew that. But we had some baseball caps made with the Navy program. Navy, I brought one of those. And after it was all over, I had half a dozen caps left over. So I sent them to fellows that I knew there. And we had the guest speaker was a vice admiral who had been an R.P.I. ROTC graduate. He was commander of the Pacific Forces at that time, or was just coming off that, was going to some Washington, and it was an difficult name. It was Admiral, the name was like Zlatiper. I'm probably not quite right. Forgive me, Admiral. But I remember sending some hats off, and one I sent to him thinking maybe he hadn't gotten one, and I sent one to one of my roommates, the one from Revere, Mass. And within a few days, I got a letter back from his son and said, I hate to tell you, but Dad died. This was just days after this. He said, I want you to know he had the best time in a long time at your reunion. And that made me feel kind of good. Yeah. Ralph Michella, his name was. Yeah. He had been in the Navy before he got in the ROTC. The Navy would take enlisted men who qualified and train them to be officers. And he was one of them. He never took his commission. He just got out. But that was the big thing in 1955. I'm glad I did it. We advertised it as a one-time only. We're never going to do it again. I was tempted to think about it 5 years, 10 years later in 05, but I think the crop, they're getting older, get fewer, and probably harder to find them. And it was a one-time thing, so I didn't.
Did you stay in contact with anyone else after that?
Yes, there's just one other of that group who lives down in the Hudson Valley. He was one of the leaders of the power company down there, Central Hudson, or one of those companies. He was president, vice president. Well, he came. He was on the ship that first ship that I was on, Floyd Cole. He stayed on the ship longer than I did, and then he was married, and then I guess he decided maybe he had enough, so he didn't graduate in 48 like I did. He was another 6 months or more later. He was a little bit behind. But I remember when I called him and talked to him about the reunion because I knew him. And he said, I don't know, he wasn't too happy with R.P.I. He never said what the problem was. We'd been rumbling about R.P.I. We'll do this one. Well, I said, you know, this has nothing to do with whatever that was about. Why don't you come and have a. So he did. He came and had a good time. And he told me after, well, he was rethinking his objections to leaving anything to R.P.I. You know, that's all. It's all about making money, getting money. That was one of the reasons behind having a reunion, was to bring some of these guys back who hadn't probably been near the place in 50 years, and get them thinking about, supporting the school. And that was about it. I haven't done much with R.P.I. since then. My wife and I did support the new Harkness Field that they built there quite a few years ago. I guess that was before '95, actually. Ned Harkness was the lacrosse coach. Yeah. I did play lacrosse while I was there. 1 year, my last term there in the Navy program, I played lacrosse. I enjoyed that. Got to know Ned pretty well. And we substantially supported the field, but I've done very little since then. Don't get to Troy very often. I don't follow the sports, and I'm not a hockey fan, and so on. That's what gets people over there.
Yes.
And I just haven't been interested in that.
How do you think your time in the service had an effect on your life?
The chances of me getting a college education would have been slim without it. My family didn't have anything. I might have been lucky to get in and get enough time in to get a degree, but you see, by enlisting, and if I had enlisted in '43, I'm not sure I could have gotten more than a couple of years. My plans in high school, I studied agriculture. I took the vocational agriculture program for 3 years because I wanted to be a farmer, I thought. And then as the war progressed, I realized if I wanted to be a pilot, which was burning desire, I would be better if I took more math and science. And so I dropped the ag the last term. I was able to take 2 more, another term of math and another term of science physics that I wouldn't have had time for if I had stayed in ag. So that changed that. But whether I ever would have gone to Cornell or some ag school, gosh, I don't know. I mean, I think I was really fortunate that I had a chance to get a degree. Eventually, I got back to get the degree. I never used any more of that time. I presume I had a lot of time left, but I didn't get any master's degrees or anything. I never felt any urge to get more degrees. But there's no doubt that the Navy set me up to have a career as an engineer that I wouldn't have had.
Okay, thank you very much for the interview.
You're certainly my pleasure.